What is going on, everybody? I am here and joined by Scott Gemmell. Scott, I am digging Star Trek, Starfleet Academy, and I am very excited to talk to you. What made you want to get into acting?
I feel like it's one of those careers that's not like a clear cut kind of thing, right? Like, obviously, if you're going to be an accountant or like a lawyer, I feel like there's a bit more of a clear path that you can take. You know, you're going to college, university, you're getting like different internships or whatnot. I feel like acting, there's like no one way to really get into it. And when I was in high school, I really enjoyed theater. I loved doing it, but all of my guidance counselors in high school were kind of, they're pushing for something a bit more guaranteed as a career path. So I took a gap year. I'm like, this is really something I think I want to pursue. And COVID kind of happened, and I'm just like, I'm not really doing anything else anyway. Let's just go full tilt into this. And if it doesn't work out in a couple years, I'll go find something else to do, but I'm just going to go for it. And so I just started doing acting classes. I started doing as many short films as I could, just really trying to put myself out there because I didn't know what else to do. I guess there's nobody really telling me, hey, this is how you get into it. This is exactly what you do.
I see that you wrote a lot of the short films. Was that kind of the path you chose to take? Like, I'm just going to write some stuff for myself for now, and then hopefully it leads to something else. And the short form is so hard to do. I can't imagine like writing a short film. People think that, oh, that's pretty easy, it's short, but it's really not, because you have to put a whole narrative into 15, 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that first started over COVID as well. So my buddy, I was lucky enough, and this was such a gift, but my friend Hawken Pelechny, he owns a production company now called Red Hawk Productions. And mainly he actually films for the Canadian Football League, because I'm based out of Toronto, and so is he. And so he already has been, doing cinematography. But we kind of both started out, him loving the behind the camera stuff, all of the technical side of it, the lighting, the sound, the camera work, the editing. He did all of that, and he'd already loved doing all of that. And then I love the creative side of it, the writing, and then of course the acting as well. So that's really how we both kind of kickstarted our own careers in a way, because now he had this amazing work that he was doing on his demo reel, and he was giving me a good opportunity to kind of show off my acting through these short films that we worked on. So that was kind of my first big eye-opening thing, is like I could almost like, try to pull like a Ben Affleck, Matt Damon kind of thing and try to force myself into it, because I have an agent as well. But obviously, when you're going out for these bigger projects at like Netflix, Amazon, any of these big projects, you're going up against hundreds of other people oftentimes. So then it's like, you can be a great actor, but some of my acting teachers taught me, they're listening to these casting directors and they're like, yeah, I don't like this guy's eyebrows, or, oh, this guy really reminds me of my nephew, so this is why I'm going to cast him. So there's really there's nothing you can really do to guarantee any sort of work doing it and relying on other projects. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of my thing. I'm like, I'm going to really try to force myself to write interesting stories that aren't just like an ego project for myself. Like, I think the first couple short films I did, I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm going to try to make myself look cool, or I'm going to like write myself doing this. But then finally the short films I started doing that worked were the ones where I was just writing them for the story, and then I would cast myself into a role after it was already written, so that it wasn't anything to do with the ego side of it.
Well, that's kind of fascinating. Is the writing side something you want to do more of in the future?
Like, absolutely. And like you said, with short form, it is hard to really like, because you are limited for sure by such a confined space. You only have like typically a film festival wants like a nice tight time frame. So 5, 10, 15 minutes. That's what they like. They don't like if you were to release like we put out like a 37-minute film and it didn't really do very well because it's hard to slot that
Mhm.
kind of project in. So it is quite challenging to confine it into a small space. But me and Hawken, our next project, we are going to scale up, and I'm writing it myself along with him. We're going to be making an hour-ish long feature film, and it's going to be based on Canadian history. So I've seen a lot of course, like countless excellent American films based on American history, whether that be World War II, the Civil War. Uh, there's too many to count where they're like these really, really well-made films. You don't really see that all that often with Canadian history. Yet
Mhm.
there's a bit of a demand there. Our Canadian station is called CBC. That's our big broadcasting station. And so they actually give out, grants for different Canadian projects. So we feel like we have a good shot if we can take what we've already learned from these short films we're doing. And basically, I'm going to be playing a Scottish settler from the early 1800s, so like 1830s ish. And so I'm going to be moving to Canada, and it's going to be kind of like a horror film along the lines of like The Witch or something like that, where it's based in reality, like the folklore of it, because that's what's very interesting about like older or historical horror films is a lot of that stuff that was happening is based off of real accounts, like The Witch, right? These are
Mhm.
things that people genuinely believed to have happened because there was a lack of scientific knowledge and real world explanations for, say, your kid gets sick and gets the plague or something like that. You're going to blame it on these other factors that are unforeseen. So that's what I really like about historical horror is you can really kind of take what was actually written, these true accounts that were explained by, skinwalker like the Wendigo or a witch or whatnot. So that's what I like about writing, is just getting into the research and kind of trying to, like, as from an acting predominant standpoint, trying to develop like something that I would want to watch, but then something that I would also want to place myself in to act in, and something that's going to be artistically fulfilling afterwards.
So, what was the process like on landing the Murdoch Mysteries?
Yeah, so that show, interestingly enough, is one of the only shows, to my knowledge, that they actually will cast the same actors over multiple seasons, like to play different characters, because that show is the longest running, I believe the longest running Canadian show, 19 seasons. So they only have such a large pool of actors to pick from. So that was one of my first professional roles a couple years ago. For season 16, I got cast as this character called Ben Hawkins. I had already had an agent at that point. I did an acting school where my agent actually came to the school to watch our work, and he liked what he saw from me for some reason. I'm glad he did, but so he selected me, and he asked me to be one of his first clients. So that he's kind of my foot in the door, essentially. So then doing Murdoch was one of my first roles, and yeah, so I got to, lay on this table. I got my, neck cut open, and it was a very interesting experience. This is what I love about acting. You're always doing something different. For my scene, I had rigor mortis. So what that means is you've been dead for long enough to where your muscles aren't moving anymore. There's no blood flow in your muscles. So my eyes were completely open, but this girl had to try to close them. And so here I'm thinking, well, they're probably going to do some sort of effect with the camera where I'm just going to like lay there and she's going to do that, but it's going to look like she's touching my eyes. They actually had her touch my eyes, but I had to be completely dead. So she's like going like this with my eyelid, And I'm just laying there like trying so hard not to move. And the first couple of takes we did, of course, like I would flinch, right? Because this hand is coming into my eyelids. Eventually and she was great working with me too. This other actress that was helping me, you know, she was the one touching my eyes. But we got it to a point where I could just zone out, and then she would touch my eyelids and nothing would happen. So, and then a few years later, they asked me again, hey, like it's been a couple of years. I would imagine nobody would recognize me from that long ago, since I was only in like one episode 3 seasons previous. And then I got to play a guy who gets busted for selling bootleg alcohol, which is fun. So I would take these really good, premium bottles from Jamaica, remove all the alcohol, then replace it with this, whatever moonshine I was making out of this basement. So it was really fun, like to have two different characters completely the opposite from one another, and them both being on the same show.
So I do want to start talking about Star Trek before we get into that, because it's big fandom. What kind of fandoms were you into growing up?
Well, I mean, like as a little kid, I loved video games. Like Super Mario is one of my favorite like fandoms ever. Zelda, Mario. I was a big Nintendo kid. In terms of movies, I think what really solidified me like getting into acting, like as like theater, as a kid, was Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh,
Like
nice.
Jack Sparrow, seeing all those 3 films, and I would watch them every time a new one would come out. I would watch the previous ones just to refresh myself. And like those movies were really, and still are, like really, really special to me. Of course, like Star Wars, like I mean, I wouldn't consider myself up there with like, some of my friends that could name you like any little, side character and all that. But of course, I love Star Wars. Star Trek, funny enough, that was like my mom's big thing. Like she loved Next Generation. She of course loved the original series. So she was almost, because she was one of the first ones that I told when I got cast in this new show. She was almost more excited than I was. And when I got cast, I knew I would be one of Darum's posse members. But I didn't know whether I would be human or what race I would be or anything like that. So my mom's like, "Oh, that'd be so cool. Like, you might be like a Klingon or a Vulcan," or she's naming all these different races. And then I find out, no, I'm just a human. And she's like, "Oh, that's okay." But she was super excited.
I gotta say, man, Star Trek, Starfleet Academy so far, I think is great. I like the fact that it's kind of got a mixture of characters there's a character from Discovery, there's one from
Yep.
Voyager. Like it's got possibilities are endless with that show. What was the audition process like?
I mean, obviously it was a good opportunity for me, because out of any Star Trek show, they're going to be casting a lot of actors in my age range. Obviously the main characters, they had like kind of like a worldwide search. And then a lot of the, I suppose, smaller roles, they're going to try to pick, more local, like Toronto actors with, the Canadian kind of film rules, I suppose, through the different unions in place. They are going to want to cast a certain number of actors from and that goes for, I guess, whatever country you're filming in. They're going to prioritize a lot of like local actors, just so they get more of an incentive to actually film in that location. So it was great. I feel like those two kind of factors were really working in my favor there. I did also audition for Darum as well. But, after seeing Darum, George Hawkins, after seeing him on set, I'm like, okay, sometimes I feel a little bit, not upset, but, I'll be a little salty if I don't get a certain role that I auditioned for. But then sometimes if I actually see the finished product, and in this case, I was actually on set, talking to him and watching him work as well, I'm like, yeah, that totally makes sense. So then my agent asked me to go on a Zoom call after I had auditioned for Durham. And I would have imagined that they had already had, George Hawkins in mind, but then whatever they saw in me, they still liked. So then they had me read George's line or Durham's lines again for like a little Zoom audition. But then they were saying, but it's going to be for like one of his posse members. And they kind of described it as this group of like people to hype him up and show that he's kind of a very, kind of macho kind of guy, right? Which is definitely how he's portrayed in the first couple episodes. I won't give anything away as the show goes on, but the first couple episodes, definitely you see, this big kind of macho persona. And we were basically there to help sell that, I suppose. So anytime Durham's kind of getting into some trouble, especially with Caleb, we're kind of there to sometimes entice that and encourage that.
Did you know you were auditioning for Star Trek when you went in for the initial audition? And is your mom's voice in the back of your head like, oh my God, she is going to die if I get this role? Like, does it make you nervous?
Well, actually, they had it pretty under wraps. They were calling it they called it Ivory Tower. Actually, there was like a code name for it. That's a common thing to do with different TV shows or movies, especially when they have like a big, built-in fan base already, or people that are excited about this project already. They're going to kind of try to keep it under wraps. So after the audition is when I was like, they were sending me more information, and they said, there's quite a possibility we want you for this. I'm kind of glad that I didn't know at first, because I feel like that kind of takes the pressure off a little bit. I never try to, when I'm going into an audition, especially if it's something that I already, maybe a TV show where previous seasons came out that I was a fan of, which has happened a couple times. And then I would get a little bit too excited about it, and that would kind of take away from my audition, right? I feel like then I'm no longer able to really just completely give something authentic. I'm almost trying to create something as a fan of what I've already seen, which sometimes can benefit, the audition if it's a show that I already know the tone and the pacing of, and I kind of know, I have an idea of what they're looking for, then that's sometimes good. But then other times it can definitely take away from the authenticity of the audition. So in this case, it worked out.
Well, before I let you go, do you have any of your short forms that you'd like to make into a long form?
Yeah, there's a few. One short film I made, it's on YouTube now on my Red Hawk Productions channel, not mine, but my friends. And it's a film called Working for the Man. And at the time, I think it was my second or third short film that I had ever written. And we kind of bit off a bit more than we could chew. It was supposed to be this kind of big existential kind of crisis that my character was going through about working this 9 to 5 that he can't stand. And something that he really feels trapped in. So he just ends up quitting his job and living in the woods for months on end. And I feel like at the time, we certainly weren't as experienced. I wasn't as experienced as a writer or an actor. And then just, we didn't know how to work the pacing, right? So there's times where it really drags. There's times where it probably moves a little bit too fast. There's times where things maybe aren't quite as explained to the audience as maybe they should be. Whereas like when I'm writing it, it feels obvious, or it feels like something the audience could pick up on, but the finished product isn't quite, up to the same level, I guess. So now with what I know now, I feel like that would be a really interesting thing to like kind of remake and expand and actually give it that time to breathe, and also to kind of really tap into those themes that I was trying to come across to the audience like a few years ago when I did make it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott, for joining me. Where can everybody find you online?
Yeah, so my Instagram is same as my name, Scott Gemmell, just with an underscore in between Scott and Gemmell. That's my main one. I'm also on IMDb, just Scott Gemmell on there. Those are my two, I guess, main ways to find me.
All right, everybody, like, comment, share, subscribe. Again, thank you, Scott. I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all soon.